Hello, everybody.
Turn this up in my headphones, Charles.
Turning it up. Hello, everybody, one and all. Welcome to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. We've got a really exciting episode for you guys today. We're going to get into our discussion of The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan with our friends Jake and Steven over at Bentology.
Yeah, we are actually talking to you from the future, so I can tell you that this was an awesome conversation. We
Super
had a really
awesome.
great time talking to Steven and Jake, and they helped us so much because you may know by now if this that this is my first time reading Wheel of Time, but we had two folks who have a lot more experience than that, so it was a
Yeah.
blast, and they're just great to have.
It
on
was
the
so
chat
much
with,
fun.
too.
Those guys are such pros. You know, we instead of going like plot point by plot point, we were able to just have a conversation, and they were so knowledgeable and also like just professional fantasy podcast hosts. It was just so much fun. Always a pleasure having them on. I guess the only other thing we would say is spoiler warning for Eye of the World by Wheel of Time. So if you haven't read that, you know, Dylan, you want to drop your famous line here?
Yeah, then you might want to turn this down in your headphones
Love it, man.
right about now. But, you know, if you want to embark on an epic journey with us and embark on it for the first time with me, then now is a great opportunity to pick up The Eye of the World because I had a great time reading this first installment of this epic series.
I had a great time rereading it as well. So, you know, without any further delay, enjoy our conversation of Eye of the World with Fantology. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Friends Talking Fantasy. With me today, as always, is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friends, Charles.
Ah, that's right. Dylan says the plural friends because we have two very special guests with us today. We have Steven and Jake from Fantology. Guys, welcome.
Pumped to be here. Thanks so much for having us on. It's always a good time. I think we've done a couple of collabs and looking forward to getting into the Burning God preview for our future collaboration.
Yeah, he's a pro. Wonderful tease there, Steven.
See what we're working with here. This guy knows what he's doing.
But we got another pro in the house, and Jake.
Hey guys, excited for this episode of The Wheel of Time. I'm a big fan of The Wheel of Time, so always down to talk with friends talking fantasy and always down to talk about The Wheel of Time.
Just a big fan of. I feel like you were saying at the beginning, before we started recording, 8 or 9 times through the book. That's more than a fan. That's
the first book. The first book.
Yeah. Fanatic, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, let's just say if you go on Theoryland, or I don't even know if that's a thing anymore, I'm definitely not. I'm not ready for that kind of excitement of the books. I don't have that kind of knowledge in it.
Sounds like you've snooped there, though.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I'm no Dusty Wheel, I guess I should say.
That's good. No, we're super thrilled to have you guys. You know, when we thought about doing the Wheel of Time, when that became a thing that we agreed to do a little while back, we almost immediately reached out to you guys because it's one of the things where it's like, we have this history, all of us, about Wheel of Time. And Steven, I think a large reason why we're here is thanks to you to kind of give Dylan the encouragement that he needed to pick this series up. And we just knew we had to have you on. We were so glad we could work it out.
I provided enough shame in our Lord of the Rings recording, I guess.
Yeah, no, just enough shame, which is, you know, always the motivator. And then Charles brought it back up in Friends Pitching Fantasy, reminded me of that shame. And now look at us. We've read The Eye of the World. So you made it happen. And I'm pumped to get into it. So this is I've read the book 7 or 8 less times than Jake has, but I have read it now, which puts me ahead of where I was the last time we were sitting around recording together. So I'm really excited to get into it.
Hey,
Yes.
you got the most recent reread or most recent read, so
I did finish earlier today, so that's
Ooh, very
yes,
fresh, hot
very
off the
fresh.
press.
yes, I'm ready to go.
So yeah, we'll appreciate Dylan's first time perspective. He's the only one of us that hasn't read it before, so his perspective will be super interesting. This is my second time. The first time I read it was many years ago. I was just doing the audiobooks from Eye of the World just straight through. It took me about 6 or 7 months to do it, but that was about 4 or 5 years ago, so a little rusty, but just excited to get back into it. I've always been a fan, so this is my second time around. I guess Steven, where does that leave you? How many times you've read it? 7 times? 6 times?
No, not quite 7. I'm gonna say 3. I think 3 is. I read it once in high school, and then I reread when Memory of Light was coming out, and then when I was getting really excited for the TV show, I reread the first book, and then it got delayed and everything. And I was like, oh, I guess I'll pick it back up again when we get closer to release date. But hopefully that show comes out. We're hoping for a 2021 release. We were also hoping for a Super Bowl commercial, maybe from Amazon Prime, but that didn't pan out. So who
They
knows?
didn't splurge. No, we're hoping that it will be timely and that we'll have read enough that we can participate in the discussion when it does air. So we're excitedly waiting for the news about the show. But the fact that nothing really has been shown has me a bit nervous, but you never know. They could just be sitting on it waiting to drop something, you know.
They're interacting with people enough on Twitter, their official account and everything. It makes us all kind of believe that it's 2021, but probably later 2021, so still months away.
Well, we've got 14 books to read, so it might take us a year or so to get
Yeah,
through them
yeah,
all.
you got plenty of content.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I want to
what?
be in the place to be able to say like, "Oh yeah, I read the books first. Yes, it
Yeah.
was I finished the day of the premiere, but
Uh-huh.
and then I can talk about how much better the books were. Like be
That
one of
was
those.
that was me with Game of Thrones. I heard of Game of Thrones via some Wheel of Time fans, but I had no idea it was a show. And I just like, oh, I'll start reading these. And then as I was reading them, my boss was like, "Hey, have you seen that show?" I was like, "Oh, I didn't know it was a show." I was like totally oblivious to HBO at that
Wow.
time, but it was like
That's
when
some real
season
bragging
1 was
rights.
out. I mean, I was reading the first book when season 1 was coming out, but
Mm.
due to being oblivious more than anything else.
Yeah, was this before the internet was invented, or what's going on here?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Like I was living at home.
He
We
was too
didn't have
busy
cable,
reading Eye
so
of the World, Steven. He was on his
yeah,
like
that was
6th
it.
read through, something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah, that
So,
was it.
speaking of before the invention of the internet, I would guess the Eye of the World probably was published around the same year the internet was invented. Is that
It was in
probably
90, published in
Yeah,
90?
90.
1990.
So, I mean, I don't know when the internet was invented, but it's about as old as I am, I know. So is the Eye of the World, a little bit older than me, older than Charles too. And yeah, I think that was an interesting thing. Reading it was trying to look back with that perspective. I would say, like,
Mhm.
I obviously I haven't read it before. It's so I've read a lot of the more modern stuff. I'm uh, and I'm wondering, you guys, looking back on it now, you've read it more recently too. Like, what sticks out for you guys as this? Like, what's more dated about it? What is more like I guess, ahead of its time about it? Yeah, Stephen and Jake, I'm curious.
For
Big
me,
question. Big question.
Mhm.
I kind of see it as like the Lord of the Rings of modern fantasy in the sense that like I don't know, it's like it has so much influence in modern fantasy, but it's also old enough that it's different. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it was ahead of its time in a lot of ways. There's the ways it kind of subverts the fantasy genre. Whereas most of what I had read fantasy wise was either like Narnia or Lord of the Rings or things that felt very similar to those. Whereas there's like parts of the Eye of the World where things happened that were completely opposite of what I was expecting from the typical hero's journey. So I think it was ahead of its time in that way.
Yeah, I think a good sign of being ahead of its time for anything is probably how much influence it has on things down the road. And The Eye of the World and The Wheel of Time have had a huge influence. It'd be really fun to like sit down and really like map out like a almost like a genealogy of fantasy books, starting
It's
from
funny
like
you say
ancient
that.
legends to Tolkien to. Are you
Yeah.
doing this already?
No, but Dylan and I have been talking about it for the past
Yeah.
couple of weeks now. Actually, reading Eye of the World kind of got us thinking about it. We were like, "Wow, 1990," and then we were like, Tigana came out around that year, and like Game of Thrones is in the early '90s as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to.
96, I think.
Okay, so the mid
Yeah.
'90s. So it's interesting to see like who influenced who, when, who was doing
Yeah.
different things
Yeah.
at the same time. Tigana, Eye of the World are like very different, but
Is
yeah,
Tigana, is
Yeah.
that Guy Gavriel K?
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one. It's we won't get too deep into it because it's Eye of the World episode. I'm sure people, but I will say Tigana, interesting one to put around the same time as Eye of the World because it's very different. Does not follow. Oh, I mean, Eye of the World, you can see, or I can see, follows a lot of pretty similar beats in some ways to the Lord of the Rings. I'm
Exact
Yeah, for
same beats,
sure.
noticing.
yeah.
For
Yeah, I
sure.
don't know what I don't
Hmm.
want to offend folks, but there's all sorts of things going on, like being corrupted by something and potentially going mad is a big thing, and it kind of like ends with that as the character kind of being like, oh no, I need to like step away from all my friends because that's happening to me. It's like, oh, who else did that? Like, well, I won't say because don't want to spoil Lord of the Rings, but it's like I feel like Tigana takes a little bit like total different approach to fantasy storytelling. So I think like you were saying, Jake, I see it as this like from just reading this first book, uh, like Lord of the Rings of modern fantasy.
Yeah.
So in the vein of now we read, oh, let's say The Emperor's Soul, for
Yeah.
example, or all these other Sanderson novels that we see out there, you can tell there's so much influence from Robert Jordan and probably more direct influence. I mean, obviously Sanderson finished up the series and all these kind of things was inspired by, but you can just see a lot more Jordan, I think, in Sanderson's writing than really a you can see Tolkien and Sanderson's writing. It's like the filter through which some of these modern folks are
That's a good
looking.
way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good way to put it. If we bring it back to the genealogy, it would be the branch, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it
Uh,
definitely feels like Either World is like a jumping off point for a lot of modern fantasy because it does follow a lot of the same beats of the Fellowship of the Ring, and I believe that that's done very intentionally by
Yeah.
Robert Jordan. And then it does just kind of springboard into this massive thing that a lot of modern authors get influence from in some ways. I mean, I'm reading it now and it's like, wow, there's a lot that I can see even like in Game of Thrones that I can see being inspired from some things that
Mm.
are happening in this book. And then like I can see like, oh, these are the things that Abercrombie like is totally like having fun subverting and
Yeah.
skewering. So it's like I can see how much influence
mm,
it's had because like this is traditional fantasy and this is how I'm kind of carving my own, but still being within that Tolkien formula. And then now modern authors are like finding their own voice in that and pushing it further. So that's how I've always seen it.
And Jake, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Jordan say that this beginning, at least the beginning of The Eye of the World, was supposed to be his love letter to Tolkien and
Yeah.
to The Lord of the Rings?
Yeah. I like you said, it's very intentional and it is meant to be kind of like this love letter. It might, honestly, for me, I think it is up until kind of maybe once they like meet back up in Camelin, or maybe after Shadar Logoth is when it starts to kind of become its more of its own. There's like different periods in the Wheel of Time where it really, like in different books, where it's like, oh, this is really shifting and becoming its own identity more and more as it goes on. But I think in the Eye of the World, the crew getting split up after Shadar Logoth, and then Perrin kind of finding his own path. And I don't know. I feel like that's like a big branch off point.
I would agree with that.
I see the stage being set for all sorts of things that will eventually happen in this series that will, I think, spread its wings and go in very different directions from anything Tolkien tried to do. I think Perrin is a character that I see. It's like there's not like a parallel necessarily. I mean, maybe because he has an axe, you could start trying to say he's like him, but it's not. He's not the Gimli, you know. Like there's parallels certainly for particular characters, but I can see that Jordan is setting the stage for this epic journey that, you have 14 books here. So if you just retreaded Tolkien, you'd run out of track pretty quick.
Yeah,
I'll say like Lord of the Rings doesn't have a whole lot of side quests to it, right? Like there's kind of the main plot line, everyone's kind of doing that stuff. Maybe there's a few things we do, but it all kind of ties back together. Wheel of Time has a lot of side quests. There's a lot of, different storylines with different characters. And obviously we're not going to talk about them in this episode, but it's very much like this huge, to kind of keep the genealogy tree thing going. It's this huge branching, sprawling tree compared to Lord of the Rings, which is a little more straightforward.
I remember, and this is more apparent in the later books, but I think even in the Eye of the World, when I was reading it, I remember thinking, Lord of the Rings has such an expansive backstory and lore to it, but the plot itself it's much more of that straight line. We got to get from point A to point B to complete the quest and complete the plot. Whereas it feels like, to me, Wheel of Time is more of, let's drop this pebble in the pond and just see how the ripples go. Whereas there is an overarching like point to everything, but all the different ripples get explored a lot more. And again, I guess that's probably outside of the scope of Eye of the World, but in the Eye of the World, you do get a lot of like hints at it and the beginnings of it. I mean, even just the jump from the prologue to the start of the book, like, and seeing the ramifications and like realizing how that connects at the end and everything.
So the prologue struck me a lot as a first-time reader, and I think the prologue was the thing that I felt like how, like, I could see Brandon Sanderson starting a novel in that manner, because it just does all these
he has
things,
right
yeah, like all these questions are immediately raised for a reader. I feel like RJ is do people call him that? We saw that on Twitter of Time. RJ, yeah, I can do that. RJ says, RJ does all these things that it's like gives you just enough to kind of understand the base of what's happening in it, right? You're like, okay, so this person is he's losing his mind, and he is having communication with some sort of dark force that has kind of defeated him. And then there's all this other stuff around that's being thrown at you in addition to that. But with kind of just this base understanding of kind of the interaction and the scope being big, then it raises all these additional questions on top of that you're like, oh, wow, this will give us a lot to get into and explore for the next 14 books from there. And I was pumped. Like, I was actually, and I've been called hasty on the podcast before, and I think,
and on other podcasts as well, Dylan.
Yes, on the Fantology podcast, I've been called hasty as well, and I have all sorts of thoughts about a particular character that showed up in this book as well that we'll get into, I'm sure. And I'll say, like, that was something that immediately set apart from Tolkien for me, was this prologue that was based in character and intrigue and all this stuff, where Tolkien was a little bit more like in legends and us, like more of the Wheel of Time turns type thing. But the Wheel of Time turns bit happens after the prologue, at least in my
Yeah.
copy.
Yeah, it's kind of like he was like, I have this idea for a cool story, and Robert Jordan came up with all this like backstory and lore and this timeline, and then he gives you like a hint of that at the beginning, and then he's like, well, let's just start from Lord of the Rings. Like he gives you
Yeah.
like, here's a hint at what this is really going to be. Now let me start it in a place that's more familiar, I guess.
Right. And that's the incentive for me, is the
Yeah.
stuff that happens in the prologue is the incentive to go through all the
Yeah, I wonder how
extra
it was
time.
for like readers at the time, whether they were like, what is this? Oh, okay. Now I feel more comfortable
Yeah.
with Lord of the Rings again. Like ease them into it. Whereas now we're like, wait, give me more of that more modern feel.
So,
For sure.
Dylan, it's hard for me to separate because I've read the series all the way through and it's been years, but you just finished the first book. How much of that prologue, like, are you able to put any pieces together yet?
I think a little bit now, because that was the first thing I did after I finished the book, was be like, okay, I'll be going on to the second one soon, but before that, I'm going back to the prologue, because I know that there's a lot going on there that's more important than whatever will be the next thing I read in the second book. So I feel like what I can put together is there's there's this guy, Luz Theron Telamon, right? And he was kind of, I don't know if he was the last dragon or he was just a dragon, and what Rand seems to be kind of on the path to potentially become. He obviously could wield this power that has. I know it's Saidin and Sayadar. Am I getting that?
Yeah, you're nailing it.
Doing great.
Okay,
Doing great.
which one is the male power?
Saidin is for men.
Okay, so
Saidar
that one has
woman.
been corrupted in some way because the dark one has gotten into it a bit. Like there's a great like analogy that they said, like a drop of like something in the water.
Oil
Drop
on
of
the river,
oil, yeah.
pond or
Thank
something
you.
like that.
See, this is why this is why we have all you on. So then that has corrupted things, and I don't know how the dark one got into it and all that kind of stuff, but that is, I assume, the reason why folks start losing their mind when they use it, when the women who are using it are not losing their minds. So he's basically like, he failed. Like, obviously they mentioned him later in the book and he was like some big hero, but ultimately I guess he failed. And my big theory for this whole thing is like that the parent's been playing out a lot, right? That's what they talk about. The wheel of time is turning and it's just doing the same crap over and over again. But like the dark one is kind of like basically not winning, but like certainly the light side isn't winning here. Like the dark one is staving them off at the very least. So I think that my big picture theory of the wheel of time is like Rand, like this is why we're telling the story now, is like Rand is going to succeed in all of the ways that Luz Theron Telamon failed. That's what Wheel of Time is about, according to Dylan, one book in.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
You heard it here. We can check back in like a year from now when we're 14.
I want that on recording. So I can say, I was like, yeah, asking about the prologue, but I think that's relevant to the prologue, right? I mean, Luz Theron is what it's about. So he obviously killed his family and all those kind of things too, and then formed that big mountain. But the first time I was reading it, I was like, I barely understand what's happening, but enough to ask the questions that make you want to read further.
Who do you think the other guy is that is messing with him?
The other guy, I found this, at first I thought the other guy was the dark one, but then on my second attempt, I realized that there was like some line that basically implied that they work for the dark one. So some sort of like second in command was, I could be told, I know you don't want to, you're giving me all these like stony faced, like, no, we're not going to spoil anything for you, Dylan, but we're also not going to tell you that you're not making a fool of yourself. So I appreciate it. That's the right way to approach this.
My roommate is reading The Way of Kings right now for the first time, so I'm pretty practiced with this face right now. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're only doing audio, but for the listeners, Jake and Steven are both nailing the stony face. We're not going to spoil it for you, first Wheel of Timer.
The prologue struck me as well. That's some interesting predictions there. And as someone who read the whole series, and then is reading the prologue for the second time ever, right? It was really interesting to revisit. I was kind of surprised by how right away how kind of dark it was. Like
Mm.
the descriptions of a lot of these corpses and things like that were darker in tone than I remembered Wheel of Time ever being. Certainly darker than like Lord of the Rings ever was in terms of like description. And I was just like, for me, like the prologue is just nailed in terms of tone. It sounds like it
Yeah.
could have been written last year. It's just that
Yeah.
fresh, especially when you compare it to immediately. It's like, and now we're at the two rivers. So the
Yes.
humble man shepherd here, watching over his flock with his father, and he's just like 7 feet tall and super handsome and strong. You're like, okay,
you
well,
do.
that's not what I was just reading. But I also, I was listening to the audiobooks, and I just love Michael Kramer going like, Aliena, Aliena. He just delivers an amazing performance. I could listen to that all
Yeah.
day.
Speaking of, now that you've read it, have you watched Winter Dragon? Our
No, what's
our
Winter
only
Dragon?
it was
Oh.
it's a
Oh,
terrible.
I heard of this.
It's on YouTube probably, but
It is on YouTube.
whoever had the rights to adapt the Wheel of Time, they were about to lose the rights, so they had to produce something. But it's basically just the prologue. So
I heard
it's like
that
40-minute prologue. Also, shout out to Dusty Wheel again. They did their own cut of it that makes it a little better. But
Not a lot. It's
Right.
still way
It's-
bad. Though.
it's
There's
got-
no way anyone could improve too much.
who's I mean,
It's got Billy Zane.
Yeah, Billy
Billy
Zane.
Zane.
Billy Zane's in, and he does a great job with what was given him. but yeah, you got to watch
not a
that.
lot was given him.
Not a lot. If you want to hear
No.
more Ileana calls, you should watch that. I'm
There's
jealous.
a very long saga to the TV rights of Wheel of Time, which we probably don't want to go into now.
Yeah, I'm jealous of you guys with your first impressions of the prologue, because I don't know how my mind got this way, but as a kid reading, I was like, oh, prologues and epilogues, you don't have to read those. And I was like, I just want to jump in the story.
Oof.
So like the first 5 or 6 books I read, I did not read the prologues or the epilogues. I was just like, no, that's just filler. I don't need that. And then going back, I'm like, how dumb am I for doing this? This is not only is it great, it's plot important to so many things.
Yeah, I say you messed up on this one. It's the
Yeah.
best part of the whole book, probably.
Well, it's like chapter 1 is way more fillery than the prologue in this one.
I don't know who is to blame for that lapse in my education, but another great thing, and this is like one of the key features of the Wheel of Time to me, is I mean, Charles, you mentioned rereading the prologue after reading the series. There's so much there that's foreshadowed or hinted at that a lot of it you don't even realize until you are doing your reread. So for me, rereading is always such a pleasure. Like I re-listened to them probably a year ago, and I still picked up on things like, oh, this is foreshadowing this right now. Where to me, first time or however many times reading, I'm like, oh, this is just a plot point, not realizing it's been foreshadowed like so long ago.
Yeah, I can see that showing up already. I was talking a little bit off air with you guys before, where it's like, there are these moments like when Tam is in a fever dream, and you can just tell even as a first time reader, like, okay, the things that he's spouting right now are likely very important for the plot. And of course, Rand is having a harder time realizing that than I think most readers would. It's like Tam's like, I'm not your father at all, and Rand's like, so he's my father. And
he's gotta be my father.
I don't think so though. So yeah, but there are these moments where I think what's interesting is RJ throws lot of stuff with names and all sorts of like clearly like future plot points that I imagine won't come to fruition for books and books and books.
Oh yes.
Like doing it all the time, and I kind of know it's happening, but I don't know what to do with the information that I know it's happening except highlight it and say maybe I'll go back later. And it's interesting because for me it contrasts with the way he does his characters. I feel like, or not his characters per se, like how he trusts his readers when it comes to characters. It's like he trusts his readers a lot to pick up on all these plot things that he's just throwing at you, but then he'll have these moments where it's like he has these very good characters, I think, that are do like these interesting things that are shown, not told, and then he tells you too, is something that I kind of noticed some here. It's like Nynaeve shows up. I hope I'm not butchering these names, so please let
Nynaeve.
me know. Nynaeve
Yeah.
shows up, and Egwene, someone,
Egwene.
Egwene.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll get
I
right
listened to
from
the
here on
audiobook,
out.
so I'm going by what
Nynaeve?
Kramer says.
That was a hard
Egwene.
one. Yeah,
That's
my
tough.
my first time through, I did not listen, and I thought her name
Yeah.
was Egwene.
That's what
And then
I did. as well.
I finally listened, and now we know it's Egwene.
Okay, Egwene. So it's like Nynaeve shows up, and then Egwene, who'd gotten rid of the braid, is now like wearing like a bow or something, and it's kind of this compromise in between, like
Rebel.
that Moraine doesn't wear any braid or anything like that, and
Yeah.
Nynaeve is like old school, wears the braid. And we get these moments where it's like, oh, she's doing that. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. That's like great character development and stuff. And then it's like Rand has these like amazing perceptions all of a sudden where it's like probably couldn't decide whether to please Moraine or Nynaeve, he thought. And it's like, all right, like you could so, you know, big Abercrombie fan over here. I think like Abercrombie would do the showing and then would just be like, okay, like there you go, and wouldn't have that extra bit of telling. So it's interesting. I
Right.
think RJ almost needs to get out of his way a little bit sometimes when it comes to like, no, you already did it. You did it. You don't have to tell us again. Yeah.
There's a reason why, there's 15 books and they're all really, really long.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys hit on like a few themes there, like prophecy, the number of characters, and just like the general feel of the books. And a huge one in the Wheel of Time is miscommunication between characters.
Oh my God.
So
Not
yeah.
even just between characters, between like nations. Just like like the telephone game is a huge plays a huge
Yeah.
part in the series.
Yeah, when I listened to the audiobook the first time, whatever version I had of Eye of the World ended with an interview with RJ and some interviewer of some kind. And what RJ was saying, he's like, well, I wanted to write this book because I wanted to write a story about how information is affected by both time and distance. It's like, how far away from the source of the news are you? And how does that affect like a game of telephone, and then over how much time as well. So that's why everyone in the Two Rivers thinks like Aes Sedai are like pure evil and they're all bad. And then in real life, they're like, it's more complicated than that. And so many different elements like you guys are touching on. That's such a huge part of these books. And that's what makes this so interesting. Then you have like the meta of it. It's a 14 book long, series, and just how information changes as you're going through it. I think that's one of the more brilliant things about Wheel of Time. Eye of the World kind of kicks that off really well.
And even that theme is sometimes a little more buried, like you were saying,
Right.
Charles. Like the Aes Sedai are perceived differently by different folks, and then sometimes it's really on the head. Where I don't remember if at the end of this book they do something like this, but a lot of times when they talk about prophecy, they're like, oh, and some folks thought it meant this, and then as the winds go, other people thought this, and etc. And it's like really obvious that we're talking about the way that information is perceived. So yeah, I think that's pretty astute pickup right there, Dylan.
Speaking of Aes Sedai, what were your thoughts on Moraine as a character? Were you like, in terms of how did you like her just as a character in a book in general, and then also did you feel like she was trustworthy, or are you still not sure? What's up?
I thought Moraine was my second favorite character. And the first was Egwene? I can't say Egwene. Once I get in my head wrong, it's like Egwene.
Yeah.
First was Egwene, and second was Moraine. And I think Moraine is I don't buy any of the things people are saying that like she's not good. I think that I buy when she says like I oppose the dark one and like I basically am going to do whatever it takes to oppose the dark one. I'm like I think you're doing that. And yeah, maybe at some point in a 14 book series that will mean she might do something not nice like right like maybe that can get a little Machiavellian at times
Mhm.
and maybe she has a little temper but sometimes but I don't know I think that I thought she was awesome like I think she's a
Yeah.
really cool
Yeah.
character I think she's complex I think that I I like that she actually does stuff with her magic. Like the one complaint I have about Gandalf is that he's like, yeah, we know he's super powerful and all these kind of things, but just in the main Lord of the Rings, I don't know if this is a spoiler, but I don't think it is to say something he doesn't do, which is like ever actually show us like cool, like fire powers are growing. Like she like Moraine like grows really big at one point and she like caused sort of earthquakes and stuff. I was
She
like,
shoots
no, this is
fireballs out
like,
of her hands.
yeah, it's like she's out there like doing the stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Like you've got your wizard equivalent out on this trip. And first off, like props to RJ for having a woman in the Gandalf, what I see as the Gandalf role
Yeah, for
anyway.
sure. Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so that's awesome. And super progressive, I think, for 1990. And
Yeah.
then on top of that, to have this nuanced, complex character that people keep telling you is kind of like bad and people don't trust them. And yeah, to have them doing stuff like she's not afraid to do the things, and that's awesome. I think so. I
Yeah, I
love
think
Marie.
you touched on something good there, Dylan. I feel the same way. Moraine's one of my favorite characters too. And when we were talking about the series, Dylan, before we started reading it, and we were interacting with people on Twitter, there's always this conversation about like how dated it is and also how progressive it is. And I feel like Moraine is in the camp of like, look, this was 1990. Fantasy wasn't exactly getting the best rap for representation. Like Lord of the Rings had like one or two female characters, and they were very understated. So to put Moraine kind of in the front and give her like these awesome powers, make her the leadership role, I think she's just like a really, really interesting character that would feel super fresh 30 years later. I think she's
Yeah.
super awesome. Yeah, the fact that she's not afraid to throw fireballs is also very appealing.
Yeah, I like she has obviously the most power magically, because she, like you said, she's the Gandalf
Right.
equivalent, but also she has the most power when it comes to just knowledge and
Mhm.
understanding, and in terms of kind of keeping others in the dark. Like she holds so much power throughout the whole book, and I wonder, I to this day I don't know if he intentionally thought, I want to write this with a female in this role to kind of subvert the genre or be more progressive, or if he was just world building, came up
Mm.
with the idea of Saidin being tainted, and
Yeah.
it just naturally progressed into it. I'm not
Mhm.
sure. Either way, it I
Mhm.
feel I totally agree. It's refreshing, and I feel like it's not. I don't know. It's like it's just such a well done for me as a male reading it. I don't know how other women usually interpret it, but it just doesn't seem like her gender is really holding her back or highlighting her. Like she just is who she is and
Mhm.
happens to be female and
Mm.
totally fills the role perfectly.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know if it's which one of those things it is either, Jake. I agree. I think it's excellently done. We do know that Jordan is much more of like your gardener type writer, discovery writer, if you will. Where I think in Sanderson's lectures he describes him as more of like a points on the map guy, where he's in developing the series is like, I know I need my guys to do this and this and this, and so my characters need to be in these places, but let's just kind of explore and see how they get there, and then along the way they grow. So it's a very different take than your Sanderson, where it's like all plotted out to the upteenth detail before
Right.
he even starts writing anything, and
Right.
it's just a stylistic choice, and it works best for each of them. So yeah, it's very much like fantasy has maybe changed a bit to where it seems like Sanderson and the hard magic and all of that is kind of
Mm.
pushing some of the new writers maybe away from this more creative discovery type writing. But I think both are great ways to interact with the genre.
Also, speaking of, I feel like we highlighted the differences between how magic is portrayed in Lord of the Rings and Wheel of Time. And from my reading, I feel like this is one of the first hard magic systems that, like, in the timeline of fantasy, I could be wrong here, but in my experience, Lord of the Rings and like all the ones that kind of like that before I read Wheel of Time were more the wizard can do this because, they can just do this and it's never
He's the
predictable.
wizard.
Yeah, he's the wizard, and you don't
Yeah.
know what the limits really are. Whereas with the Wheel of Time, I mean, it's kind of hard in the eye of the world because it's all being introduced, but it's very much more rule based as opposed to, and then they're doing this now.
Right. And I think the idea of having like the male version and the female version is just super, super interesting. And like you said, the fact that one is tainted, right? So now there's this added level to the world building, not just of how the magic works, but now it's like, okay, if a man is channeling, he's a risk to everyone. So they just
Yeah,
become like enemies. So there's this almost kind of like this conflict that comes up as the result. And it's just like as far as just through Eye of the World, you can imagine like the potential of that and like how much that theme can be explored in future, in future novels. To me, like the idea of Aes Sedai and Saidar and Sayadine, like you said, it's the parts from Lord of the Rings and that Jordan has put so much thought into his world building, and I think world building is like the main like takeaway from Wheel of Time. It's like there's so much that goes into it, and the magic system
Oh
is certainly
yeah.
no exception.
yeah, and I like how it affects the whole like cultures in general. Like you have the women's circle in this backwoods village. Like women have a lot more power because
Mhm.
it's kind of like subconsciously men are a little less trusted because of the whole tainting of that
Sure.
power. There's like, I don't know, I just think that like the way that he thought about that and like the repercussions throughout society is pretty interesting.
Super interesting.
Yeah, it just permeates across the map there.
Yeah.
And it's very cool. I mean, as you get more into the series, you'll see a lot of these other cultures that you've seen on the map. They're all very distinct and have their own kind of takes on some different things. And they all seem very real. Like, honestly, after reading the series a time or two, you feel like you could just take a vacation off to anywhere on the in Randland. There's no name for the actual
Interesting.
world, by the way, Dylan. So people just call it
That's
Randland.
really
Yeah.
that's funny. Yeah, I can tell I try not to delve too deep into the actual like hashtag Twitter of Time community because
Yeah,
when
it's
I did,
dangerous.
all of them were like, please, like go away until you finished. I use the hashtag first real timer sometimes and stuff. But
Yeah.
I'll say that I can tell they're a community that has all these memes and funny names for things and things that
Yeah.
they're all kind of talking about. So I'm pumped to get more into all that. And that Randland thing is funny. And I'll say, yeah, you could probably take a vacation to anywhere in Randland because I know there are many, many inns. That was one of my takeaways. It's like, oh, like another inn, and then we get the whole description of the inn. So
And the innkeepers, everything.
Yeah, you got to make sure they're like fat and balding, otherwise it
Yeah.
could be
Never
potentially
trust.
just
that was
Yes.
that was a weird through line there. But I don't know. I'll say it's interesting. Something about Wheel of Time is I guess we were talking before about this, like it's less of a straight shot than Lord of the Rings, and I think it is kind of fun when you're hopping around Randland. It's almost each new area has its own like fun set of characters was something that stuck out to me, and I think the characters that you meet in all these different places, I don't know, they come alive pretty quickly, I think, and they each really have their own personalities, or depending on sometimes it's like a full culture that you'll meet, and I see that happening already in Eye of the World, and I assume that's just gonna get much bigger with what I see.
no, it's just 14
Setting this
books of
story.
like
Yeah,
the same thing over and over. They don't really expand on it at all.
that's yeah.
Yeah, there's no
You
more.
know,
There's no
that's a
more
shock.
characters.
Yeah,
You would
we've
think,
met them
yeah.
all. I honestly, we've met enough characters that I'm sure there'd be a lot to work with, even for 14 books. But I'm sure we'll meet a heck of a lot more.
Something
So,
Oh, go ahead,
So
Steven.
out of who we've met so far, like who should we discuss? Who are some standouts?
Steven, you've read the book 8 or 9 times. Are there any characters in either world? I mean, Jake, you've read the book 8 or 9 times. What are some of the characters in either world that stand out for you?
Um, Heart of the World. I mean, Moraine, like you guys said, she's.
Mm.
I think my first time reading through, I was a lot younger, and so I was just like, oh, Rand is the main character. You know, I'm gonna. And then Perrin has some like points of view as
Yeah.
well, and it like disseminates from there. But I was much more attached to them. But on all my rereads, I'm like, Moraine is so cool. Like especially seeing like I don't know, she's just a great character. Lan is awesome too. He's like the say a few words, but just be have such a presence, you
Yeah.
know, in the book.
Mhm.
But probably one of my favorites is got to be Tom. And again,
Oh.
he has such a small a part, you know, but just the idea of a Glee man I thought was cool, and this idea
Yeah.
of kind of like a father figure, trying to care for these kids. But
Jake, I remember when we did our review of The Wheel of Time, you brought up a detail that I hadn't noticed, which was in his stories that he tells at the beginning of the book.
oh
There's
yeah,
actually some that like talk about Earth history
Huh.
in kind of a
yeah.
roundabout way.
So the idea of the Wheel of Time, and this isn't like super on the nose, and I don't know, you have to kind of like delve into it more, but it's supposed to be because ages come and go, and it's like the cyclical nature that it's Earth's past and present. These books are, and so they one of the stories. There's a couple. He references Mother Teresa, and obviously her name has been like changed through time. Again, kind of that telephone game. And he mentions I can't remember the
Something about
name.
the there's one about the lunar landing, right?
Yeah,
That
it
it's
said someone
referenced.
goes in like the belly of an eagle and flies to the moon or something, referencing like going to the moon. And then he says the Merc and Scow or something fight with their spears of fire, referencing like the Cold War, America and Moscow or something like that. There's like lots of things you should Google it because I think it's mostly just Eye of the World stuff. Like it's an Eye of the World. I don't think the other books, and you can see all the references to our history in there. Which that's not something I obviously picked up the first time reading it, but it's kind of an interesting detail to it.
I'll have Charles Google it because Twitter of Time warned me not to Google anything multiple times.
Yeah,
I
if you
got
go to
you,
the
buddy.
Wheel of Time Wikia at all, the very first detail on any character page is like, are they dead or are they alive? And you don't want to see that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Dylan, even when I was preparing the notes for this book and looking through the summary on the wiki, like it says who the other person is in the prologue, right? First sentence. So you're like, oh, well, I'm glad Dylan's not on here because I don't know if he cares about that, but it's something that it doesn't actually explicitly say in the book. So it's something that
Yeah.
you got to be careful about. Steven, what are some of your standout characters?
I'll say so it's fun to meet some characters. They're not huge in this book. Maybe I shouldn't talk about them because that might be a little bit of a spoiler.
Well,
You can at least
if you
say
think
what
so.
you like about him in terms of
Yeah.
who you liked meeting
okay.
for the first time.
So I
Go for
really
it.
liked meeting Min the first time, and I loved the different visions she has. We already kind of talked about prophecy, but to go back to that, I love how some of these prophecies are unveiled, and then they're just these like story hooks if you're into D&D that don't get picked up for books later sometimes. And sometimes they are fulfilled in really surprising ways that you wouldn't think make sense and surprise the characters even. And so Min kind of provided that moment for me when some of her things were fulfilled like much later on in like totally blew my mind. One specific thing, which I probably definitely should not mention, but
Yeah.
yeah.
She is like a prophecy machine.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's her job.
That's yep.
I like Matt later on. He kind of sucks in this book because
Yeah.
he's got the whole
It's a
dagger
dagger,
affliction
yeah.
going on.
That'll
yeah.
do it.
Yeah, it's funny. He becomes like a fan favorite.
I can
Later
see
on.
that. Yeah.
but it's so interesting knowing that, and then because a lot of people are like, oh, don't you love Matt? And then you're reading Will or Eye of the World, you're like, no, he sucked. He didn't do
Well,
anything but complain.
yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, Charles, when you've mentioned Wheel of Time to me, you've said that I would probably like Matt. Is that
Give it like
accurate?
13 more books. But
Like
yeah, I did say that
like
because
me?
I just know the kind of characters that you gravitate towards. I don't want to like put too much more detail into it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
like just from knowing the kind of books that you like to read and the characters that you like to read, I thought that Matt would be one of those um down the road. I kind of forgot like just like if you just look at Matt's storyline, it's like, oh, Matt is being mischievous and no one likes him. He steals a dagger and becomes really mean, and then he's not as mean, but still forever going to be kind of mean in the end.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, well
yeah.
that's not that great. So yeah, Matt is cool, and like he does get to become a crowd favorite, and I can see that. For me though, my favorite character, I agree with Dylan Moraine, is a solid like second place. But for me, actually, I've always really liked Perrin.
He's
Perrin's
awesome.
always kind of jumped off the page for me. I feel like a lot of these other characters could be slotted into the Lord of the Rings cast in some way. Like I see Tom and Moraine both kind of having different aspects of Gandalf, and then you have like,
Yeah,
oh, like Matt's basically Merry and Pippin. Like you can slot people away, but Perrin is kind of the beginning of this new trope of character, this like reluctant noble character that I feel like I can't remember reading much sooner. I'm gonna equate him to another character. I'm not gonna spoil Game of Thrones, but I get a lot of Jon Snow vibes from
Mm,
Perrin, and it's
interesting.
Yeah,
interesting
I
to
can see
think
that.
about
I
like
can see it already.
1990 versus 1996 and just how many parallels there are between Perrin and Jon. Um, so I just
I don't know
really
if you guys have read Farseer at all, Robin Hobb, but I
yes.
think some like
Yep,
some
Farseer
fits
is a
as
good
well.
example as well. Right, I
Mm.
just think like that. I think Perrin. I haven't definitely we have to go into our genealogy, Stephen, but I think Perrin is one of those Genesis characters for people that like Jon Snow and for like Fitzchivalry and things like
Mhm.
that. So I just like Perrin a lot. And also it's funny to read him. I also get some Abercrombie vibes when like Perrin's like, oh,
Oh,
Rand would know what to do in this situation. And then Rand is like, oh, Perrin would know what to do in this
I
yes.
situation.
love
Like he's
that.
making a joke by changing the POVs.
Yeah.
A very Abercrombian kind of thing to do. I mean, Abercrombie
Mhm.
takes it so much
Okay,
further,
okay.
but I feel like in 1990 that was like the beginnings of it. So a lot of this stuff is happening through Perrin, and for me, that's why I just gravitate to him so much. He feels like he's like so his own trope. Like we're getting the beginning
He
of the Perrin trope.
he has such a unique like abilities, I guess,
Yeah.
like for compared to other. I mean, I guess it's kind of hinted at. You have, was it Bjorn and the Hobbit? Is that his name? Have you guys
Um.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I
the
remember
the guy
that
the guy who
dude.
helps him right before Mirkwood, and like he's kind of like this beast man. He's more of
Yeah,
a
changeling
shapeshifter,
Mm.
yeah.
type
Whereas,
guy.
but
Um,
just like you're saying, the Perrin, his character and also his abilities are very much different than the Lord of the Rings standard set. So it was really cool.
yeah.
Yeah. In
Like
terms
kind
of
of
the magic system, it's such a departure from Lord of the
yeah,
Rings.
Right.
yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, he's really cool.
Dylan, that
Yeah.
leaves you, buddy.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mentioned Moraine at 2. I'll say that even though I can't say her name, Egwene, did
Yeah,
I
you
get it this
nailed
Nailed
time?
it.
it.
I
Yeah.
got okay. I was like, that was it, right? I was like thinking through it because I knew the question was coming, and uh, Egwene sticks out to me in the way that a character we've been reading that comes 30 years later about in Monstrous sticks out to me, which is Little Fox, but I'll talk more about Egwene, which is Egwene, I feel like is a character that right now is pretty much like plucky and headstrong and all of these things and really means well and wants to do good and just doesn't right now have the power to do much about the fact that she has all those desires and bravery, really, like unbelievable courage. And I'm always like really impressed by these characters that are kind of underdogs in a world where a lot of really messed up stuff is happening and are just like, I guess, willing to just put themselves out there and put themselves at risk at times in which they probably shouldn't. And I feel like Egwene does that just over and over and over again. I really, even in like the final battle of the Eye of the World, it's like she is so out of her league. I mean, more than any other character there. Because, like, Rand, like, oh no, he's just a sheep herder. But also, like, oh, now I'm wielding the one power. And it's like, you kind of know that's happening. And Egwene is like, I can do little tiny tricks. I'm going to use them on you. And it's like, no, that's not going to work, Egwene. Please, no. And I've always loved characters that just give it their all, despite the
Their
fact that,
character's
like,
stronger than their power level.
yeah, their fortitude, their mental fortitude, and their courage is stronger than their power level demands. And I like to see those characters hopefully come into their own and then like keep that same courage and all of that, and now actually have the power to do something about it. So I see in Egwene the potential to be that kind of character, and I'm really holding out hope that she gets there.
I think one of the funnest things about the Wheel of Time is just the massive story arcs, character arcs the characters go through over the course of all the books. And I'm really excited to have you read the rest of Egwene's arc, because it is one of my favorites. Every character really is going to go through incredible changes and ups and downs and whatnot, but hers is one of my personal favorites. I'm totally with you.
Yeah. I was thinking, and I could be conflating the show and the books together, but when I read the books for A Song of Ice and Fire that are out now, like I feel like the characters don't change much, huh? Like they're pretty much the same people, like personality wise, the whole time. Like they
in
grow.
The books?
In the books, and like I said, it could be
some characters certainly change.
Like personality wise, I feel like they're still kind of the standard personalities that they were at the beginning.
Are we talking Song of Ice and Fire or Eye of the World?
A Song of Ice and Fire.
Oh, interesting. Like the first book?
I mean, man, I feel like I'm
all of it.
Some
okay.
characters.
They're definitely okay. There definitely are some changes, but for most of the people, no spoilers for the series.
Yeah, this is a tough one without spoilers.
For most of the people, I feel like their motivations have remained the same. I mean, they've grown as people, but they're still kind of the same. Whereas I think it's very noticeable the difference between Rand, Egwene, Matt in book one compared to where their arcs end throughout the series.
I see what you're saying, Stephen. When you have a series as comprehensive, I'm sorry, Jake. I see what you're saying, Jake. Where it's 14 books, right? And as the series goes on, and this was when I pitched this series to Dylan to try and get him excited about it. I was like, there's no experience like reading 14 books, following some of these characters for 14 books, like just to see like from where they start to where they finish, it feels like you're like lived with these characters for so long that you can't even imagine it ending, right? And with other series that are more contained, like yes, they go through character growth and they go through their arcs and everything like that, but it's kind of different when you're reading Wheel of Time because it's so much longer and you're sitting with the characters for so much longer, and things are happening that don't even advance the plot. They're just happening and you're reading it and you're still in the character. Like it's just a totally different experience.
And I'm not knocking Game of Thrones at all. I love Game of Thrones, and I think it has probably some of the best written characters on page. And there are some big changes. I'm not trying to say there are, but I just feel like the difference is so stark. Rand, book one.
Hey.
I think
see what you did there.
So Stark nailed it.
Oh,
I know I was the last one to pick up on that, but
no, I didn't even realize.
No, I think Jake was.
Well, I'll say, Jake. I feel like I'm. Yeah. I feel like I'm picking up some what you're kind of putting down there with A Song of Ice and Fire, which is it. It feels like sometimes the character growth in A Song of Ice and Fire is more peeling back the layers that were always there with certain characters and revealing them to the reader over time. And I think,
Yeah.
Charles, you can edit this
Mhm.
out if this is too spoilery, but I'll just say a character's name, which is Jaime Lannister.
Yeah.
Right? Like that, I'll just say that. And I think that I am, I can tell that the characters in Eye of the World, they're kids, they've
Yeah.
never seen the world, anything like that. And now we're going to deal with 14 books of them going through, I imagine even it's going to compound from what they've been through in just this first book. And the amount of change that someone would go through after 14 books worth of those events from their humble beginnings, I would
Mhm.
think has to be a lot bigger than like a lot of the characters in A Song of Ice and Fire are seasoned characters who've dealt with a lot who are now dealing with even more. But it's just they don't have a different starting place.
Yeah, I guess the difference, like you said, is the Wheel of Time characters start out younger, more immature, like from their base level. So there's a lot more room for that change. Sorry, hopefully this generates controversy, and so
So much
lots of
attention.
lots of people comment about it
Yeah.
and direct the hate at Fantology. Or
Yeah. Jake,
that was Jake.
Yeah, all the Song of Ice and Fire fans are gonna cancel you, Jake.
Yeah. Well, talk to me when Winds of Winter comes out. So
Now they actually might.
no, I love Song of Ice and Fire though. Seriously, some of the best characters ever read.
For sure.
That's the official stance of Jake from Fantology on A Song of Ice and Fire. He loves it and some of the best characters he's ever read. Do they grow? No comment. He says.
One thing I like to ask people as they are, I mean, I say people, but really we've done it with Steven's brother-in-law who's been on our podcast and now you, Dylan. But knowing that the TV show is coming out, you've read book one, what are some things you think would be really cool to see on screen, to see that adaptation? And what are some things where you're like, I don't think this is going to work. They need to like downplay this or change this. And what are some things they should highlight?
Interesting. Okay.
Kind of like a question of changing mediums almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think with the right sort of funding behind it, which I imagine Amazon is giving, I haven't been following all this, but I imagine like Moraine's powers were the first thing that came up. I'm like, you got to go in on her doing some really cool stuff, and don't the M Night Shyamalan Avatar movie it like
Yeah, don't do that.
make it like some high budget awesome magic powers, and I'm all in for those moments. I think in a TV show, the first thing that sticks out that would have to change is like, let's cut down the time in the rivers over there and just try to take it like over to when stuff starts happening. Maybe a little bit less of like this chapter we continue to ride horses and
we don't need to go to every inn. Is that what you're saying?
Maybe cut down the inns a little bit. And I think they'd have to bring in the characters where it's like, they did this all the time in A Song of Ice and Fire to Game of Thrones, is like turn two characters into one and all those kind of things. So I imagine those would be the biggest changes that would need to happen to bring it to the screen. I think that like some of these moments of like the characters not really communicating well. I think that you can have the same plot points, but you just need to have a little more subtlety in the interactions of how they got there. Because I think like RJ's right there. I actually think the characters are great, especially when you put it in the context of 1990. But then there's like a little bit missing in the way they like communicate that feels almost like, I mean, they're kids, I guess, right? They're naive and they're kind of
So that's hard. That's a harder thing to do on TV when you can't really like write about some, like you really have to show everything. You can't really tell much hardly at all on TV compared to the books. Yeah,
we're not going to accept when Tam says I'm not your dad, we're not going to accept that like that's not not true if we're not in Rand. I mean, we maybe don't already, but we're going to be even more hesitant to accept this. Like Rand doesn't buy that when we're not in his internal monologue and seeing his struggle of like, but he's been my father my whole life. How can I accept it? And then we're little like, okay, well, I get why if you're a kid and your dad just said they're not your dad, you're like, okay, like that's hard to understand. But I think it's just if you don't have that internal monologue, it's
Yeah.
even harder to make
Yeah,
the miscommunications work. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you guys? I mean, I like this will be the you've never seen a good Wheel of Time show before, I guess. Like, what things stick out to you? Because you've been thinking about this for a long time.
I think honestly, if they could play up the horror elements of the Eye of the World, I think that would make it kind of have its own, find its own place. I mean, Game of Thrones had the White Walkers, and that was more, I don't know, like slasher, I guess. But like making the Murdral that's following Rand in the beginning be really scary, and then when they're in Shadar Logoth, just trying to make it more suspenseful. I think that's what
Yeah.
Trollocs
what
sound
it would
pretty
need.
scary too. You know, there's a lot of opportunity to really nail a nasty looking Trolloc. You know,
Yeah, as
I
long
feel
as
like in
they
the
Yeah.
book it's almost like, oh, there's Trollocs. We killed like 100 of them, and that's fine. You know,
yeah
it's like let's
Yeah.
raise the stakes with the Trollocs. You
That's a
yeah
know,
good idea.
build that threat with an air of like unknown to it to make it a little more creepy. That's what I would
because I
like.
feel
I
like
mean,
Lord of the
going
Rings
back
with orcs, it's like, here we killed 100 orcs. Not a huge issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, going back to Lord of the Rings, the opening is really similar to Lord of the Rings. When I saw Fellowship for the Ring for the first time when I was younger, I was terrified of the
Yeah.
opening of that movie.
yeah.
When they're being chased by the ring wraiths and hiding under the tree root, and
That
he stops and
scream.
he tries to get them and
Oh,
he screams. That was horrifying for me as a
yeah,
child. So I would hope for something similar. I mean, you have the same story, and then you have Shadow Logoth, you have the ways. There's all these
yeah,
different horror elements,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, but I
yeah,
feel like
I
there's
think
some that don't work, like Mashadar, and like that. It's like, oh, it's an evil mist that exists, and it's just
yeah.
it's mist and it's evil. I'm like, yeah, let's just get rid of that. We don't need that whole scene. Let me just get to the Trollocs and the Fades and the like. Let's have these villain characters that just pop up at the end. Like, let's maybe flesh them out a little bit more, you know, so
Yeah.
we can have a little bit more of an epic
mm,
battle at the end. It's like, oh, look, we're the Forsaken. We're here now. It's like, okay, like, who are
Yeah.
you? So, like, in TV, I feel like they're gonna be cutting back and forth a lot, trying to build that up.
Right.
So who knows?
yeah. Did you guys watch The Witcher?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think one of my biggest disappointments of The Witcher was the last episode. Just the magic special effects were just not there for me. I don't know what happened with the special
Yeah,
effects
and
budget
just
there.
I also
So
feel like it was not to like rag on anyone that was in that, but I feel like a lot of those roles were miscast quite a bit, and they're just like all of a sudden all these
The
mages are
sorcerers,
the
you're saying.
sorcerers, they're all fighting each other, and you're like, whatever, man. Like we're supposed to feel bad that this character's like getting killed, and we're like, do we even know
Yeah.
have any?
yeah.
Are we invested in this character at all? So, and like, what even is happening?
I'll
So
say
there's a little bit of a sorcerer battle at the end of the Eye of the World, right? We've got
Yeah.
you just kind of alluded to this.
Mhm.
We've got Agenor and Balthamel showing up,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden, like, ooh, here we are. We're the Forsaken. We're gonna, take you down. And I don't know, like, what do you think, Dylan? Did that go too quickly? That's maybe one criticism that I have of the Eye of the World. If you couldn't tell, is like I just felt like the ending is a little rushed and a little
So
confusing
confusing
to me.
too. Very confusing.
Yeah, I mean they come out of nowhere and just as everyone's been saying, it's like, hey, we're two of the Forsaken. Watch out for us because we're back in business and more are coming. Don't you worry. And then it's like, okay, now they're attacking, and I think a lot of it. I was getting into this idea y'all were talking about this like horror Trolloc element because I guess a lot of the battles in this just didn't have that extra for me where it's like Trollocs I don't buy as like a legitimate threat. They were just kind of forced to keep the plot moving. It was like,
Especially
oh, the horns are coming. I guess we have to go to the next inn, and it's like so I think like yeah, it'd be to answer your question, Steven, yes, it was abrupt for me. I think it just like stuff started happening all of a sudden, and I saw myself getting close to the end of the book, and I was kind of waiting, like, wait, where's the climax? But I also with Wheel of Time, I've been prepped a little bit to not expect it to like have these huge climaxes. I've been a little bit more in the perspective of like Lord of the Rings than I have been in something like
Yeah, it's not a
Sanderson or Joe
Sanderlanche.
Abercrombie.
It's not a
No.
Sanderlanche at all.
Yeah,
This
we got plenty of time, and we will get a Sanderlanche from what I understand in
Yeah.
the last few books. So
About
I,
3
I,
books worth.
I don't understand that criticism of the Wheel of Time. Honestly, I feel like except for a handful of times, and a handful isn't that many out of 14. The climaxes have been awesome. Book one's climax to this day, when I reread it, I'm like, maybe I know enough that I'll follow it. I'm still like, this is confusing. I don't know. It
yeah,
must be intentionally confusing. I don't know. But I
Yeah.
think the next book, The Great Hunt, has an amazing
Yeah.
climax.
Yes, it does,
I
yeah.
think book three, not as good as The Great Hunt, but also amazing. And like, I think they consistently are really good, except for a couple of them that are less actiony and more
Yeah,
like
I think
plot
the world
resolving.
really struggled with establishing the threat, like Dylan said,
Yeah.
Trollocs, it's like, I don't buy that they're a threat, and then the big bad himself, it's like, "I'm in your dreams, ooh," and they're like, "I don't believe you," and he's like, "No," and then they wake up, so you're like, "Okay," like,
Yeah,
that's
that's
the most evil
yeah.
guy in all of all
yeah,
time.
you killed some rats.
Yeah. So I think they need to, and we had no history with Agenor and Bothamel and that kind of stuff. So I think I can definitely buy into the fact that in future books we're more familiar with who the bad guys are and they do more bad things. So when we do face them, it's the stakes are a lot higher and they're more
And
believable.
once you've read the series, looking back, the first book does make a lot more sense.
Mhm.
And you can like, okay, here's who these guys are. Here's what was going on with Balsamon. It's much, you can even understand what Rand is doing in Tarwin's Gap. And he hears this voice, right? That was probably like, what the heck is this voice?
It's not
Mhm.
And
really
if
a
you're
threat.
reading it, if you're reading it's in all caps and it seems super significant, but you're like, what is this? And it takes a while to understand what all these things really
Yeah.
are. Yeah,
That speaking of the dreams thing, that's another thing where I feel like
Mm,
if they could play that up to be creepier
mm.
and like scary, actually scary. I don't know if they can though. It'd be hard to actually make
Uh,
it scary.
I
You
think
kind of
maybe you
have
got a
to though
shot.
because you really can't
Otherwise,
afford
it's
to make those
silly.
scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was kind of seeing it a little bit when there's like scenes with like mirrors and all this kind of stuff, and I was like, I could see it if. I guess I'm always amazed when I think of how Peter Jackson was able to see Helm's Deep out of
What was
Helm's
written.
Deep in the
Yeah.
books. So there's
yeah.
always this lingering part of me with adaptations where I'm like, if Peter Jackson could take that part of the Two Towers and be like, oh, we can turn this into a
Yeah.
giant epic battle that like hardly resembles what you were reading. I'm like, you can do anything if you've got the right people
But
Mhm.
thinking
Dylan,
about the right
remember
things.
how he handled Sauron. You just keep calling him an eye. It's like, how do you make the big bad when he doesn't do anything and we never see
Yes.
him? Like this guy's just haunting the dreams of 16-year-olds. It's like, what is like can we get a little more stakes?
Wait, I didn't realize till just now. Like obviously, the Bosomon in the dreams is Sauron, right? The burning
Yeah, for
eye, the eyes
sure.
and
Yeah.
mouth are on fire. Yeah,
For
another.
sure. But there's also like I see the influence where it's like don't say his name, like Voldemort kind of. Like it's really interesting to see like how that stuff
Yeah,
Yeah, I
creeps
guess
along.
that's something that I picked up on is I felt like, wow, like Harry Potter was way more influenced by Wheel of Time than I would have guessed, or seems to be with some of the plot points that I was like, because obviously I'm more familiar with Potter than I am with Wheel of Time, and
Only
I
barely.
only barely. That's my other like. I'm not. I think I'm in a safe place to say I have not finished the books of Harry Potter, and I'm not necessarily a huge fan of that series. So I'm sorry. Okay, that'll take the heat off of Jake. If you think that Song of Ice and Fire
Yeah.
fans, so cancel you. If they made it this far, they're the Potter fans are coming for me. So
Potterheads are relentless, man. They will
Yeah.
never stop.
yeah, so I'll just trust them not to make it this deep into the episode. But you know, it's cool. I'm glad that all of y'all love everyone who likes Harry Potter. I'm glad that you love it. Never really quite made there, but I was like, oh my god, this like Hugh must not be named thing that had to be grabbed from Wheel of Time to some extent. It feels like.
I
Yeah,
wonder
I
if
wonder.
has she listed that as her as
No
an
idea.
influence? I
I
have
don't
no
know.
idea.
I don't know if maybe that was a trope of like having
Maybe.
a taboo name. I don't know.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's only two I can really think of.
We need to
Yeah,
do that
same.
genealogy.
The
Yeah.
genealogy is coming.
Yeah,
So,
We can
yeah.
trace it back somewhere.
the origin of fantasy. It's the
Yeah.
origin
Sounds
of
like
fantasy.
a Reddit post that's going to get us a lot of karma. We got to
Yes, it's all about that karma. So I mean, so we think of it sort of as a family tree, and that genealogy bit, kind of right, like you'd way toward the if we did, I guess, where modern fantasy came from, way at the top would be like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, and it branch out
Mhm.
from there. And you know, I really bring up trees because I would be remiss if
Oh.
I mean, after our discussion on Fantology about the Two Towers, I would be remiss if I did not bring up the fact that there's that basically Treebeard is in this Eye of the World. Like I legitimately,
Basically.
I was legitimately like, wait, no, and the character, it's loyal.
Yes.
Is the character right?
Yep.
That's an ogre,
Ogier.
ogier.
Ogier, yep.
Egwene. So I think so
Yes.
yes. So Loyal literally says like don't be too hasty twice. And I was like I can't
Yeah.
believe like it was clear already it was Treebeard, but I can't believe they dropped that. And I was literally like, "Oh my god, I can't I don't know if y'all watch Community at all. I know Charles has seen it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you
I
know.
love it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, you know, in the Glee episode where they're putting on the show, and then Britta comes out and she's singing terribly, and the dean looks down and he's like,
Oh.
"Oh, Britta's in this."
Well,
That was
how do you-
me. I was like, "Oh, Treebeard's in this." Like, I was
How-
enjoying it, having a great time reading Eye of the World the first time, and then Treebeard comes storming into the show,
Man,
ruin it.
I don't get how you hate Treebeard. First of all.
Treebeard's awesome. I
Second
love
of all, I don't get how you hate Loyal. Loyal is like one of the
Well, is Dylan saying he hates Loyal, or are you saying that the second time around you're more forgiving of the
Oh
character?
no, I'm saying that I think at this point it's kind of a meme for me. Like I think like Treebeard just exemplifies to me the things that other people oftentimes like love about the Lord of the Rings, and I appreciate that they do. And for some reason, that when I'm reading it, I'm like, how am I still reading the like this whole thing? And also the bit about him saying like, "Don't be too hasty" while I'm feeling that is like, stop invalidating me, Treebeard. I want to move on. So I think like. Yeah, I guess for me at this point, I just saw it and I knew like we'd talked about Ents on Fantology, and then this character comes on, and I was just immediately thinking like, oh, I cannot believe there's a Treebeard, and it's such that's the
Yeah.
most one-to-one character
Yeah, for
probably in
sure.
the whole thing is that Loyal is like Treebeard, right? Like literally says, "Don't be hasty" a couple times.
Yeah, the
So-
Ogier are like an elf ent combination, right? They're kind of the elves of the world, but they act more like ents. When you first said Treebeard, I thought you were going to be talking about the Green Man at the end.
Oh yeah, then I was like, oh, we got a second Treebeard in the mix.
He's
At
cool.
least that
Like a
one.
Tom Bombadil, kind of.
Yeah, kind of.
Well, when they said Green Man, then another sitcom, I was like, "What is this? Charlie Kelly? Like the from
Oh.
Always Sunny,
Yeah.
right? Like his like Green Man outfit."
Green Man.
Yeah, so that was a hard one too. And then I was like, okay, that one's a tree also. So yeah, a lot of trees going on, a lot of tree beards, but all in all, a great tale, a great first book in a 14 book series.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Everyone's like,
I just
don't put this off the rails.
I mean, my username in our Discord is Elder Hammond, who is an Ogier elder. So
Oh,
I take offense.
I'm sorry. Well,
You
you could be defender of Elder Hammond because
you're
I'm defender of Denna over there. So I know what it's like to feel attacked when people are going after your favorite character. So I'm sorry I was doing that to you, Jake.
you're putting a long handle on your axe, is what I would
Oh,
say.
maybe I'll like Elder Hammond. Who knows? I just
Nah,
did not.
You won't. Be honest. I don't really even like him that much. Just a cool name.
Yeah, there is more of a plot line with the tree beards with your Ents. So
Yeah.
look forward to that.
I can't wait. It's gonna be awesome.
Awesome, guys. Well, I'm also looking forward to like when like some of these Wheel of Time fans they like uncover a never before heard interview with RJ, and he's like, "Yeah, when I was writing Egg Queen," and everyone can be like, "Oh, Dylan was right all along."
And they have to re-record all the audiobooks.
Yes,
Because I've never heard him say the name, so who knows?
To be fair, I love the narrators. I think they do a great job.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They do mispronounce some stuff. There's a glossary in the back,
Mm.
and I can't I can't do an episode on the Wheel of Time without bringing this up. There's a place called Gildon, and it's and they pronounce it Giladon.
Yes.
So many times, and I'm like,
I
how
say Giladon.
the book came with a glossary, a pronunciation guide in the back. You'd think if you were the narrator, you would use your resources, but so don't feel bad about mispronouncing anything.
Jake, I mean, you and I and Charles and Dylan, I'm sure we've never, like on air recording, you've never mispronounced. Yeah, see, did it right there. Never mispronounced anything, right?
You never mispronounced.
I wasn't criticizing them. I was just using it to help Dylan not feel bad about.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you.
Pronunciation.
Yes. I have never mispronounced anything ever. Definitely not Egwene. So,
well, was it Brandon Sanderson that says like once it's out, it belongs to the fans?
Yeah.
So pronounce it however you want. Like, I don't want to misquote him, but someone said that. Some famous author said that.
Sounds great. Yeah.
I mean, it's tough for
people. Sounds like something he would say.
It's tough for us podcasters out there because, especially if you only read and if you're only reading, I was switching back and forth between audiobook and Kindle, so I have no excuse for not being able to pronounce Egwene. But I'll say that if you're only reading it and then you are supposed to talk about it, it's like we're asked to be able to pronounce it. If we were doing reviews on like a blog or something, you don't have to run into that. So it's we're in a tough spot, I think.
I mean, we kind of talked about this before we started recording. I'm reading the Malazan books, which I'm saying that wrong. I know isn't it Malazan?
Yeah, it's supposed to be Malazan. That's what Erickson says. But almost everyone says Malazan. But
and the narrator of the audiobook says Malazan. So I mean, and also Malazan is so much easier to say.
Oh
yeah, for sure. I've been saying Malazan for so long. I don't know if I can change now.
Yeah.
We just did an episode on Dune, talking about a book with a bunch of crazy pronunciations.
Yeah.
Like at one point, we were calling a prophetic title the Quiznos Hacky Sack because it rhymed with the real thing.
Yeah, it's the Quizats I don't even know anymore.
Quizats, Hatterach, something like that.
Yeah.
That book's got some crazy names.
Yeah.
Yeah, RJ doesn't do us any favors with Egwene and Elaine. That always kind of bothered me. I get them confused. I'm like, what? Wait,
yeah,
it's like the same person, kind of. Yeah,
and they're different.
Oh, they're very. The names they're very different.
But the name's similar, and a lot of these like apostrophes all over the place, and I don't know. That makes it tough for me.
And like land, sometimes it's written with like the AL. Like dash, and you're not supposed to say that.
Yeah. Yeah, one actually. So we mentioned this kind of earlier. My mom's the one who got me into these books. She loved them when I was growing up. But my dad, who also likes fantasy and sci-fi books, stopped reading them because in the first few chapters you had a character named Tam, Rand, and Lan, and he was like, "I'm out. I'm out."
Yeah.
Too many
Yeah.
characters that sound the same.
That's fair.
Yeah, I feel that pain. I've never quit because of it, but I've certainly been like, oh no.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Any parting thoughts, guys, before we wrap it up here?
I just want to know what are Friends Talking Fantasies plans for the series? Dylan, this is like your current TBR. This is your number one priority.
I would say that this is right now. It is my number one priority. I would say you're totally asking the wrong person because Charles actually knows our reading schedule, but you're also especially asking the wrong person because that's never stopped me from talking way more than him when I don't know what I'm talking
Once
about.
Dylan started talking, I was like, "Oh God, I'm dying inside."
Charles, is this my number one priority right now?
For the next 4 weeks, yeah, it is.
Okay.
We're gonna read the first 3 books straight, but then
Okay.
we're gonna take a break and we're gonna add books as we're gonna read a new series and then sneak in some more Wheel of Time, and we're just gonna keep putting it in the rotation with breaks to do other stuff, because otherwise it would be 6 months straight of just Wheel of Time content, which the balancing act is tricky there.
I think the first 3 books are a good place to stop too.
Mhm.
It's like from there it really starts to jump off into a kind of a different tone. So
Yeah, that's
I'm
good to
just
hear. We definitely are
amazed.
gonna finish.
I'm just amazed, and I want to know how you do this, Charles. How do you have the power to control what your channel is reading? Because trying to get Mythology to read something together, that's
Well,
not even possible.
I was
That's like trying
telling
to
Dylan before, I'm like, I don't envy Steven because there's 5 of you. There's only 2 of us, and I'm one of them, so that makes it super easy. So
He has to deal with the occasional I come in and demand that we start reading the Poppy War when we're supposed to be reading Lord of the Rings. But besides that, he usually can rope me in to what needs to be done.
yeah, we can only read one series at a time, but at least we can put it on at least plan it somewhat.
Yeah.
I don't be trying to coordinate 4 or 5 different schedules. I don't see that. You guys do impressive work over there, keeping that machine running.
It's just a matter of okay, who's reading what? How can we possibly piece some episodes together? Great, let's do it.
Yeah, that's
Well,
our reading
speaking
schedule.
of, Steven, what kind of things might we expect in the future from Fantology?
Well, I'm about halfway through Burning God, and you guys are going to have the privilege and honor of recording with Ben, who is also reading the Burning God, and we only have 7 or 8 more days left on our library checkout. So he's telling me he's going to be done with it by then. So yeah, we're looking forward to recording that with you guys. That's probably next up.
That's a good one too. We're very honored to be part of the end of your Poppy War read.
Oh yeah. I'm halfway through, really enjoying it. It picks up right where the second book ends, and it's just nonstop, and it's going into some very interesting and dark places. But that was what I knew going in.
The pacing of it is super interesting.
Breakneck.
Talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And Jake, we'd love to have you there, but I assume you will have been devoured by angry A Song of Ice and Fire fans by
He's reading Malazan. He needs to focus.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, seriously, I don't know how I'm gonna make it through. I probably need to buy the actual book too. I need to get the ebook, the physical book, and the audio book, and somehow
all the help you can get.
Combine the forces of it, along with the Tor reread chapter summary, so I can understand what I just read.
That's big.
Yeah, I have it, Jake. I have it. I have the physical book, and I will loan it to you.
Okay.
Now that's a true friend.
And while we're on this topic of upcoming Fantology stuff, when that stuff does come out, where is the best place for folks to find it, and where's the best place for folks to find everything that you've been doing over there up until now, all this awesome stuff?
Yeah, you can find all of our episodes online at www.phantologybooks.com. We have our full catalog up there divided into some different series. If you want to follow us, you can do that at Phantology Books. We do some stuff on Twitter. It's kind of fun. I don't know.
That you do.
We're doing a top 3 fantasy romances in the month of February, Valentine's Day. Sappy romance.
Mhm.
Tune in there. You guys have entered into the competition, so best
Yes.
of luck.
Yep.
Made
Yeah,
Twitter.
I got Denna in there.
Dude,
Yeah.
Quoth and Dinah.
Yeah.
Although we were, I don't want to go into spoilers or anything.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Off the air. We'll get there.
Hey, I'll just say when I submitted my top 3 fantasy romances, Quoth and Denna were in there. I'm with
Nice.
you.
It's
really
a
enjoyed
classic
it.
Nice.
for sure.
Oh yeah, I
Nice.
mean, say what you want about those two, but they, if nothing else, they make people feel strongly.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that says a lot. That's my no spoiler version.
I love the teen angst portion of romances, and they have got it.
Yes.
In spades. Check out Phantology, guys. Jake and Steven, it's been a pleasure. Steven, as a fellow coordinator, we should compare calendars so we can book Memory of Light, the 14th and final installment. We'd love to have you back on in like a year from now. So we'll
Wow.
put that in the books.
All right. Our first episode of 2022. It's on.
Guys, thank you so much for having us on. We love Phantology. If you like what you heard today and you haven't for some reason checked them out, please do. Like several months ago, they came on, they supported us when we just started, and we'll always love them for that. So thank you so much, guys. You're welcome back anytime. Can't wait to talk Burning God over on Phantology. It's going to be so much fun.
Thanks so much for having us. It's always a blast. You guys do great stuff.
Yeah, we love being here.
Same to you guys.
All right, everyone, that is going to be it for today. Thank you again, Phantology, for such an awesome discussion. Be sure to check those guys out. They have a fantastic podcast. You don't want to miss that. If you like what you heard today and you want to go ahead and support the Friends Talking Fantasy podcast, find us on Twitter and interact over at the FTF podcast with a number 1 at the end. We are also on Facebook and Instagram at the FTF podcast. Now, Dylan, if someone wanted to support the show and they just so happen to be on Apple Podcasts, where can they go? What can they do?
They can toss 5 stars to our podcast by scrolling down on that Apple Podcast page until they see some stars. And when you see those stars, the best thing you could do to help us out would be to click 5 of them. If it so happens that you have the time to leave a review, that would be awesome too. And yeah, I mean, still just listening to us though and making it to this point, we appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for listening all the way to the end. We love you. We appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And as always, go forth and conquer, friends.